The blood on the rocky trail caught Vincent O'Sullivan's attention before he saw the woman's body crumpled against the canyon wall. Her dark hair matted with dirt and crimson, her traveling dress torn to shreds by what looked like a hard fall from the cliff above. He reined in his horse quickly, dismounting before the animal had fully stopped, his boots hitting the Colorado ground with purpose as he knelt beside her still form in the shadow of the mountains that surrounded Black Hawk, this rough mining town he'd called home for the past 3 years. Her pulse beat faintly against his fingertips when he pressed them to her neck, and relief flooded through him despite not knowing this woman from Eve. She was young, maybe 20 or so, with delicate features now marred by cuts and bruising that made his jaw clench. Her left leg bent at an angle that made his stomach turn, clearly broken, and her breathing came shallow and labored. "Easy now," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him in her unconscious state. Vincent carefully assessed her injuries, his years of ranch work giving him enough knowledge to know she needed help fast, or she wouldn't make it through the night. The sun was already sinking toward the peaks, and the temperature would drop soon enough. He couldn't leave her here to die. Making a decision that would change both their lives, Vincent lifted her as gently as he could manage, ignoring her soft groan of pain as he settled her against his chest. She was light, too light, like she hadn't been eating properly. He managed to get her positioned on his horse, holding her secure with one arm while he swung up behind her, adjusting her weight so her broken leg wouldn't jostle too badly on the ride back to his cabin. The journey took nearly an hour, every minute of it torture as he tried to keep her stable while navigating the rocky trail. His cabin sat on the outskirts of Black Hawk, far enough from the rowdy mining operations to have some peace, but close enough to get supplies when needed. He'd built it himself 2 years back, solid logs and a good roof, with 2 rooms and a loft that served him well enough for a bachelor's life. Getting her inside proved challenging, but Vincent managed, kicking the door open and carrying her to his bed. He laid her down carefully, then immediately got to work building up the fire and heating water. He'd need to clean her wounds and set that leg before infection or shock killed her. Working by lamplight as darkness fell completely outside, Vincent cleaned the gash on her head first, relieved to find it looked worse than it actually was. Head wounds always bled something fierce. Her face emerged prettier as he washed away the blood and dirt, revealing smooth skin and features that would make any man look twice. He pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. The leg was the real problem. He'd set broken bones on horses and cattle, even helped the town doctor once or twice, but this was different. This was a woman who'd already suffered enough. Vincent gave her a small dose of whiskey, dribbling it past her lips, hoping it would keep her under while he worked. Then he took a deep breath and did what needed doing, pulling the bone straight and setting it as best he could, binding it tight with splints he fashioned from kindling wood and strips torn from an old shirt. She cried out during the worst of it, her eyes fluttering but never fully opening, and he found himself murmuring reassurances like he would to a spooked horse. When it was done, he sat back, sweat dripping down his face despite the cool evening air, and took stock of his patient. She'd live, he thought, hoped, needed her to, for reasons he couldn't quite name. Vincent spent that first night in the chair beside the bed, jerking awake every time she stirred or moaned. By morning, fever had set in as he'd feared it might. He spent the next 3 days battling it, cooling her with wet cloths, forcing water and broth past her lips when he could, checking and rechecking her injuries for signs of infection. On the 4th day, her eyes finally opened. They were the most startling shade of green he'd ever seen, bright even in her weakened state, and they fixed on him with confusion and fear. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, cracked and dry. Vincent reached for the cup of water he'd kept beside the bed. "You're safe." "My cabin outside Black Hawk. I found you on the trail, injured. Do you remember what happened?" She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, and he was there immediately, helping her ease back down. "My leg. Broken. I said it as best I could." "You also had a nasty knock to the head and more bruises than I could count. Looks like you took a hard fall." He held the cup to her lips, letting her sip slowly. "What's your name?" Her green eyes studied him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. "Sarah," she finally said. "Sarah Renwick. Vincent O'Sullivan. Most folks call me Vince." He set the cup aside. "You have people I should notify, someone who'll be worried about you." Something flickered across her face, pain that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. "No, no one." He didn't push, though questions burned in his mind. A woman traveling alone through these mountains, no one to miss her, wearing a dress that had once been fine but showed signs of hard wear. There was a story there, but it could wait. "Well, Sarah Renwick, you're going to be here a while. That leg needs time to heal, and you're weak as a kitten. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." The words came easily, though a voice in his head wondered what he was doing, inviting a strange woman to stay in his home. "I can't impose on you like that. You've already done so much." But even as she said it, he could see the fear in her eyes, the knowledge that she had nowhere else to go. "It's no imposition. I've got room, and it wouldn't be right to turn you out when you can't even stand." Vincent stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the gratitude shining in her eyes. "I'll fix you some proper breakfast. You need to eat, build your strength back up." Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Vincent would wake early, tend to his small herd of horses that he bred and trained, then return to check on Sarah. At first, she could do little but sleep and eat the meals he prepared. But gradually, color returned to her cheeks and strength to her limbs. He learned her story in pieces, little revelations that came during the quiet evenings when he'd sit reading while she rested. She'd been engaged to a man in Denver, the son of her father's business partner. When her father died suddenly 6 months back, leaving debts she'd known nothing about, her fiancé had broken the engagement immediately. The business partner had seized everything, leaving her with nothing. "I had an aunt in California," she told him one evening, her fingers pleating the quilt he'd covered her with. "Or I thought I did. I sold the only thing I had left, my mother's necklace, to buy stage fare. But the stage never came through Black Hawk. We had to change routes because of flooding, and I—" She paused, swallowing hard. "I got desperate, tried to take a shortcut on foot over the mountain pass. Stupid." "Brave," Vincent corrected quietly. "Desperate maybe, but brave too. Takes courage to start over with nothing." Her eyes met his, something warming in their green depths. "You've been very kind. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Don't need repaying. Just get better." But as the weeks turned into a month, then 2, Vincent found himself hoping her recovery would take longer than necessary. He'd grown accustomed to her presence in his home, the way she'd started helping with small tasks as her strength returned. She couldn't put weight on her leg yet, but she could sit at the table and peel vegetables, could mend his shirts with neat stitches that put his rough attempts to shame, could fill the evening silence with conversation that made him realize how lonely he'd been. Sarah Renwick was sharp-minded and quick-witted, with observations about the world that made him think, and a sense of humor that caught him off guard. She'd taught herself to read from her mother's books, had opinions on everything from politics to philosophy, and wasn't afraid to argue with him when they disagreed. "You can't honestly believe that ranching is going to sustain this territory forever," she said one evening, her eyes flashing with passion as they debated Colorado's future. Mining is what built Black Hawk, what built half of Colorado. When the gold and silver run out, this will all be ghost towns. And ranching will still be here, Vincent countered, enjoying the way her cheeks flushed when she got worked up. People always need to eat. Cattle, horses, they're the future, not digging holes in the ground chasing veins that'll run dry. Spoken like a true rancher. But she was smiling, that soft smile that had started appearing more often lately, the one that did strange things to his heartbeat. It was in the 3rd month, when Sarah first stood on her healing leg with his support, that Vincent realized he was in trouble. Her hand gripped his arm, her whole body trembling with effort and fear. And when she managed 3 shaky steps, her face broke into a smile so radiant it stole his breath. "I did it. Vincent, I actually walked." Without thinking, he wrapped his arms around her, supporting her weight as she laughed with pure joy. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucking just under his chin, and the rightness of it terrified him. He was falling in love with her. Had probably been falling since the first time she'd opened those green eyes and looked at him with trust, despite having every reason to fear a strange man in an isolated cabin. Vincent stepped back quickly, steadying her with his hands on her shoulders. "That's real good, Sarah. Another few weeks and you'll be strong enough to make it to town." Something flickered in her expression, there and gone too quick to read. "Yes, I suppose I will." The thought of her leaving, of this cabin returning to its previous emptiness, felt like a physical blow. But what could he offer her? He was just a horse rancher scraping by, his cabin small and rough, his prospects uncertain. She deserved more than a hard life in the Colorado mountains with a man who had little to his name beyond determination and a decent work ethic. Still, as fall painted the aspen trees gold and Sarah grew stronger each day, Vincent found himself inventing reasons for her to stay. The weather was getting unpredictable, better to wait until spring. Her leg needed more time to fully heal, no sense rushing it. The trail to California would be easier once the winter snows melted. Sarah never argued with his reasons, and he couldn't quite read her expression when he gave them. Sometimes he'd catch her watching him with an intensity that made his pulse race, but she'd always look away before he could interpret what it meant. The first snow came in late October, heavy and early, transforming the landscape overnight. Vincent woke to find Sarah already up, standing at the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring out at the white world. "It's beautiful," she said softly as he came to stand beside her. "I'd forgotten how peaceful snow can be." "Means you're stuck here for the winter now," he said, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the surge of satisfaction that knowledge brought. "Trail to California won't be passable until spring at the earliest." "I know." She turned to look at him, her green eyes serious. "Vincent, I need to talk to you about something." His heart began to pound. "All right. I've been here for 4 months now, living in your home, eating your food, and I've contributed nothing. I can't keep being a burden on you." "You're not a burden." "I am, and we both know it." She held up a hand when he tried to protest again. "Please, let me finish. I can walk now well enough. I can cook and clean and help with the household. I know you usually handle your own washing and mending, and I've seen the state of your pantry organization." A small smile touched her lips. "Let me help. Let me earn my keep properly, not just as an invalid taking charity." Pride and independence shone in her eyes, and Vincent understood. She needed this, needed to feel useful and capable after months of dependency. "All right," he said slowly, "but you're not a servant, Sarah. You're a guest, and if you want to help out, that's appreciated, but it's not required for you to stay." "I want to help. I need to." She looked down at her hands. "And the truth is, I don't want to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever." The last words came out barely above a whisper, but they hit Vincent like a thunderbolt. Sarah, I know I have no right to say that. You've been nothing but kind and I shouldn't presume, but this is the first place I've felt safe in longer than I can remember. The first place that's felt like home. She finally met his eyes again. If I'm overstepping, please tell me. I can make arrangements to stay in town when spring comes, find work there until I can afford to continue to California. Vincent's hand reached out seemingly of its own accord, gently cupping her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. What if I don't want you to go to California? The words escaped before he could stop them. What if I want you to stay here with me? Her eyes opened, hope and uncertainty warring in their depths. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between pulling you off that trail and teaching you to walk again, I fell in love with you, Sarah Renwick. His thumb stroked across her cheekbone. I'm saying that this cabin's been more of a home in the past 4 months than it ever was before, and that's because of you. I'm saying I know I don't have much to offer, just a small ranch and a rough life, but if you'd consider staying, if you'd consider me, I'd spend every day trying to make you happy. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, that radiant smile that transformed her whole face. You really love me, more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I love you too. I've been falling in love with you since you sat by my bedside for 3 days straight fighting my fever, since you taught me to walk again with so much patience. Since every small kindness and every evening conversation. Her hand came up to cover his where it still rested against her face. I'd be honored to stay, Vincent, honored to build a life with you. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, pouring all the feelings he'd been holding back into that kiss. She kissed him back with equal tenderness, her arms coming up around his neck as he pulled her closer. It felt like coming home, like finding something he hadn't known he'd been searching for his whole life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. We should do this proper. I'll take you to town when the weather clears, introduce you around, court you the way you deserve. Sarah laughed softly. I think we've gone a bit beyond traditional courting, living under the same roof for months. People will talk. Let them talk. I want everyone to know you're mine if you'll have me. He pulled back just enough to look in her eyes. Marry me, Sarah. Make this official. Make this forever. Yes, she breathed. Yes, absolutely yes. They spent the winter snowed in together, and if Vincent had thought those months before had been good, they were nothing compared to this. Sarah transformed the cabin into a real home, adding touches that made it warm and welcoming. She reorganized his chaotic pantry, hung curtains she sewed from fabric they'd found in an old trunk, cooked meals that made him realize he'd been merely surviving on food before rather than actually eating. But more than the physical changes, it was the intimacy of truly sharing his life with someone he loved that amazed him. The quiet mornings when they'd wake wrapped around each other. The evenings reading aloud by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder. The conversations that ranged from practical plans for the ranch to philosophical debates to silly stories from their childhoods. He learned that she was ticklish behind her left knee, that she sang off-key when she thought he couldn't hear, that she had a terrible sweet tooth and would do almost anything for maple candy. She learned that he was hopeless at darning socks, that he could recite poetry he'd memorized as a boy, that he had nightmares sometimes about his time in the war, and she could soothe them just by being there. They made plans for the future. Vincent would expand his horse operation in the spring, maybe add some cattle. Sarah wanted to start a garden, maybe keep chickens. They talked about children, both wanting a family, though they agreed to wait a bit, give themselves time to adjust to married life first. When the snows finally began to melt in March of 1876, Vincent made good on his promise to take Sarah to town. The ride to Black Hawk took half a day, Sarah sitting in front of him on his horse, and he felt the tension build in her body as they got closer. "What if they don't accept me?" she asked quietly. "What if they think poorly of you for taking in a strange woman? Then they're fools, and we don't need their approval anyway." But he understood her worry. Small towns could be harsh in their judgments, particularly of women. Black Hawk sprawled across the mountainside, a collection of wooden buildings and muddy streets built on mining money. The population had swelled to nearly 1,000 souls, most of them men chasing gold and silver dreams. Vincent guided his horse to the general store first, helping Sarah down carefully. Her leg had healed well, but she still favored it slightly, probably always would. Martha Caldwell, who ran the store with her husband George, looked up as they entered, her eyes widening with curiosity. She was a stout woman in her 50s who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. "Vincent O'Sullivan, as I live and breathe. We haven't seen you in months. Thought maybe you'd frozen to death out at that cabin of yours." Her gaze shifted to Sarah, sharp and assessing. "And who might this be?" "Martha, George, I'd like you to meet Sarah Renwick, my fiancée." He said the word with pride, his arm settling protectively around Sarah's waist. Martha's eyebrows shot up. "Fiancée? Well, this is news indeed. How did you meet?" Vincent had prepared for this question, keeping the story simple and mostly truthful. "Found her injured on the trail last fall, nursed her back to health over the winter, and somewhere along the way we fell in love." "How romantic," Martha said, though her tone suggested she was reserving judgment. "Well, congratulations to you both. When's the wedding?" "Soon as we can arrange it," Vincent said. "We'd like to speak with Reverend Thompson, see if he's available next Sunday." News spread through Black Hawk faster than wildfire. By the time they left the general store, having ordered supplies and fabric for Sarah to make a proper wedding dress, at least a dozen people had stopped to meet Sarah and offer congratulations. Most seemed genuinely pleased for Vincent, who was well-liked despite keeping to himself. A few of the older women looked at Sarah with suspicion, clearly doing calculations about propriety and wondering what had really happened in that isolated cabin over the winter. Vincent didn't care. He'd never given much thought to what others believed about him, and he wasn't about to start now. Reverend Thompson, a kind-faced man in his 60s who'd come to Black Hawk to minister to the miners' souls, agreed readily to perform the ceremony the following Sunday. "I'm always happy to join two souls in matrimony," he said, shaking both their hands. "God works in mysterious ways, bringing you together as he did." They spent the week preparing. Sarah worked on her dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored fabric. Vincent bought a new shirt and had his one good suit cleaned. They invited the few people Vincent considered friends, mostly neighboring ranchers and a couple of the more respectable town families. The night before the wedding, Vincent insisted on sleeping in the loft, despite Sarah's protests that it was silly considering they'd been sharing a bed for months. "We'll do this right," he said firmly. "One more night won't kill me, and tomorrow you'll be my wife proper and legal." Sarah smiled, pulling him down for a lingering kiss. "Tomorrow I'll be your wife," she agreed, "and every day after that for the rest of our lives." The wedding took place in Black Hawk's small church, attended by about 30 people. Sarah looked breathtaking in her cream dress, her dark hair pinned up with wildflowers Vincent had picked that morning. His hands shook slightly as he slipped the simple gold band on her finger, the ring having belonged to his grandmother and being one of the few things of value he owned. "I, Vincent O'Sullivan, take you, Sarah Renwick, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I, Sarah Renwick, take you, Vincent O'Sullivan, to be my lawfully wedded husband, she responded, her green eyes shining with tears. I promise to love you, support you, and stand by your side through whatever comes for all the days of my life. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them man and wife and Vincent kissed his bride, the small congregation erupted in applause. Martha Caldwell had tears streaming down her face, apparently won over by the obvious love between them. The celebration afterward at the town hall was modest but joyful. Someone had a fiddle, another a harmonica, and soon music filled the space. Vincent danced with his wife, holding her close as they swayed to the music, both of them grinning like fools. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. "When I was lying broken on that trail, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was actually just beginning." "Our life," he corrected. "Together." They rode back to the cabin that evening as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent carried Sarah over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. O'Sullivan. I've been home since the day I woke up and saw you sitting beside my bed," Sarah said, pulling him close. "But thank you for making it official." That night and many nights after, they celebrated their union properly, discovering each other with tenderness and passion. Vincent marveled at his good fortune, at how close he'd come to riding past that section of trail the day he found her, at how different his life might have been. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch thrived under their joint effort. Sarah proved to have a natural way with the horses, able to gentle even the most skittish with patience and soft words. Vincent expanded the herd, taking on commissions to train horses for wealthy buyers in Denver and beyond. Sarah's garden flourished, providing vegetables they could eat fresh and preserve for winter. They added chickens, just as she'd wanted, and a milk cow Vincent bought as a surprise for her birthday. In late August, Sarah came to him in the barn where he was working with a young stallion, her face glowing with news he could read before she spoke. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. Vincent dropped the lead rope, crossing to her in 3 long strides and lifting her off her feet in a spinning embrace. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I've missed my monthly twice now, and I've been sick every morning this week." She laughed as he set her down carefully as if she might break. "I wanted to be certain before I told you." "A baby," he breathed, his hand settling on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, Sarah, I'm beyond happy. I'm terrified and thrilled, and I can't believe we're going to be parents." He kissed her soundly. "When?" "Early spring, I think. March or April if I'm calculating right." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. As Sarah's belly swelled, Vincent became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more and refusing to let her lift anything heavy. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, though she drew the line when he tried to prevent her from feeding the chickens. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him firmly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their daily work. I'm not going to spend 6 months sitting idle. I just want to keep you safe, keep both of you safe." Her expression softened, and she took his hand, placing it on her rounded stomach where their child moved and kicked. "We're safe, Vincent. We're healthy and strong, and we're going to be fine. But I need you to trust that I know my own limits." He tried to relax, though it went against every protective instinct he had. The thought of losing her, of anything going wrong, kept him awake some nights. She'd become the center of his world, and the idea of a life without her was unbearable. As if sensing his fears, Sarah would curl against him in the darkness, her hand finding his. "I'm not going anywhere," she'd whisper. "You saved my life once already. I'm not about to waste that gift." Winter came early and hard that year, snow piling up around the cabin by December. Vincent made sure they had plenty of supplies laid in, enough to last until spring if needed. He'd arranged for the doctor from Central City, the larger town down the mountain, to come when Sarah's time arrived, but he worried about whether the man would be able to make it through the snow. Martha Caldwell, who'd become a friend to Sarah over the past months, came to visit when the weather allowed, bringing baby clothes she'd knitted and advice about childbirth that made Vincent's face turn red. "Don't look so panicked, Vincent," Martha laughed. "Women have been doing this forever. Sarah's young and healthy and she'll be fine." "How can you be sure?" Martha's expression gentled. "I can't be, not entirely, but worrying won't help anything. All you can do is be there for her, support her, and trust that God will see you through." The baby came early on a March morning when the first hints of spring were just beginning to show. Sarah woke Vincent before dawn, her face calm but her hand gripping his tightly. "It's time." Vincent had prepared for this moment, had a plan worked out, but all of it fled his mind in the rush of panic and excitement. "I'll get the doctor. I'll ride to Central City right now." "There's no time for that," Sarah said, surprisingly composed. "The pains are coming fast. This baby isn't going to wait for a doctor from Central City." "But I don't know how to deliver a baby. You've helped horses and cattle give birth. It can't be that different." She tried to smile but grimaced as another contraction hit. "Besides, you don't have a choice. You're all I've got, and I trust you." Those words steadied him like nothing else could. Vincent helped her to the bed, then rushed to get clean linens, hot water, all the things he'd heard were necessary. The next hours were the longest and most terrifying of his life. Sarah labored with incredible strength, following her body's instincts, while Vincent did his best to help and support her. "You're doing so well," he told her, wiping her sweat-dampened face with a cool cloth. "You're the bravest person I've ever known." "Tell me that again when this is over," she gasped, then cried out as another contraction seized her. As the sun rose fully, painting the cabin in golden light, their son entered the world with a lusty cry that made Vincent's heart nearly burst from his chest. He caught the baby with shaking hands, hardly believing what he was seeing. "It's a boy," he said, his voice breaking. "Sarah, we have a son." He cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped him in soft cloth, and placed him in Sarah's arms. She looked exhausted and radiant all at once, tears streaming down her face as she gazed at their child. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Vincent sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Sarah, his hand gently touching the baby's tiny fist. The infant's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and Vincent felt his whole world shift and settle into a new configuration. This was what life was about. This moment, this family, this love that seemed too big to be contained in one human heart. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked, looking up at Vincent. "I was thinking Thomas, after my father. Thomas Vincent O'Sullivan." "Thomas," Sarah repeated, smiling down at the baby. "I like that. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one." The weeks after Thomas's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Vincent had never imagined he could love someone so small, so helpless, so completely. He'd wake in the night to find Sarah nursing their son, her face soft in the lamplight, and feel grateful beyond measure. Sarah recovered well from the birth, growing stronger each day. She took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything, learning as she went, never complaining about the exhaustion or the constant demands of an infant. "I love him so much it scares me sometimes," she confessed to Vincent one evening when Thomas was finally sleeping peacefully in the cradle Vincent had built. I never knew you could love someone this much." "I know exactly what you mean," Vincent said, pulling her close. "I feel that way about both of you." Life settled into a new rhythm as Thomas grew. The ranch continued to prosper, Vincent's reputation as a horse trainer spreading throughout Colorado and beyond. Sarah managed the household and cared for Thomas, but she also started keeping the ranch's books, her neat handwriting and head for figures proving invaluable. When Thomas was 6 months old, Vincent came in from the barn one evening to find Sarah looking at a letter, her expression complicated. "What is it?" "It's from my aunt in California, the one I was trying to reach when you found me." She looked up at him. "Someone in Denver must have mentioned to someone who knew her that I'd married and stayed in Colorado. She wrote to congratulate me and to tell me that if I'd made it to California as originally planned, I would have been disappointed. She died 2 months after I left Denver." Vincent sat down beside her, taking her hand. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It just makes me realize how everything worked out exactly as it should have. If I'd made it over that pass safely, if you hadn't found me, I'd have arrived in California to nothing and no one. Instead, I fell off a cliff and found everything I ever needed." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Strange how life works, isn't it?" "Strange and wonderful," he agreed. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. A harsh winter in 1878 nearly wiped out half the herd, but they rebuilt. A fire in 1879 damaged the barn, but the house and family stayed safe. Through it all, Vincent and Sarah faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing season. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. In 1881, Sarah gave birth to their daughter, Elizabeth, a tiny thing with dark curls and a sweet disposition. 2 years later, another son arrived, William, who proved to have his father's way with horses from the moment he could walk. The cabin expanded over the years, growing from 2 rooms to 6, becoming a real family home. Vincent built Sarah the front porch she'd always wanted, where she'd sit in the evenings with their children, teaching them to read from the books she'd managed to acquire. He taught them all to ride, to respect the land and the animals, to work hard and be honest. Black Hawk changed too, booming and then slowly declining as the richest mines played out. Some people left, chasing the next strike in places like Leadville and Cripple Creek. Others stayed, putting down roots, building something more permanent. Vincent and Sarah stayed, their ranch becoming a fixture of the community. Martha Caldwell became like a grandmother to their children, spoiling them with sweets and stories. Reverend Thompson baptized all 3 of them, and later tutored Thomas in reading and mathematics. The community that had once viewed Sarah with suspicion came to love and respect her for her kindness, her intelligence, and her dedication to her family. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1886, Vincent took Sarah riding up into the mountains, leaving the children with Martha for the afternoon. They rode to the spot where he'd found her all those years ago, the trail looking different now but still recognizable. "I think about this place sometimes," Sarah said, dismounting and walking to the edge where she'd fallen. "About how frightened I was, how hopeless everything seemed." Vincent came to stand beside her, his arm sliding around her waist. "I think about how close I came to taking a different route that day, how easily I might have missed you. But you didn't. You found me, and you saved my life in every way a person can be saved." She turned to face him, her hands coming up to frame his face. The years had only made her more beautiful to him, tiny lines around her eyes from laughter, a maturity to her features that came from weathering life's storms together. "I love you, Vincent O'Sullivan, more today than the day I married you, and I'll love you more tomorrow than today." I love you too. You and those kids and this life we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed of having." He kissed her softly. "Thank you for falling off this cliff." She laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "Thank you for being the kind of man who'd stop to help, who'd take in a stranger and care for her with no thought of reward. Thank you for being you." They stood there a while longer, looking out at the Colorado landscape that had brought them together, before riding back to the home and family they'd created. The children grew, each finding their own paths. Thomas, with his quick mind and love of learning, eventually went to university in Denver, studying law. Elizabeth proved to have her mother's way with numbers and her father's business sense, taking over the management of the ranch as she grew older. William, true to his early promise, became one of the finest horse trainers in Colorado, expanding the ranch's reputation even further. Vincent and Sarah grew older together, their hair going gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and good years. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unshakable. On a summer evening in 1901, 25 years after they'd married, Vincent sat on the porch he'd built for Sarah, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Sarah sat beside him in her rocking chair, her hand in his as it had been for a quarter century. "You ever regret it?" he asked. "Staying here instead of continuing on to California?" "Not for a single moment," Sarah said without hesitation. "This is where I was meant to be. With you, building this life, raising our children. Everything that seemed like a disaster at the time, everything that went wrong, it all led me exactly where I needed to be." "I found you broken on that trail and carried you home," Vincent said, squeezing her hand gently. "And I never wanted to leave," Sarah finished, smiling at him with all the love of their years together shining in her eyes. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing. Elizabeth's 2 daughters and William's son visiting for the summer. Thomas was expected tomorrow with his wife, making the family complete. "We did good, didn't we?" Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "We did better than good. We built something real, something lasting." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, just as she had so many times over the years. "We built a love story." And it was true. Against all odds, through chance and choice, through hardship and joy, they had built a love that would last not just their lifetime but echo through the generations that came after. The ranch would continue, passed down through their children and grandchildren. The story of how Vincent found Sarah injured on the trail and carried her home would become family legend, told and retold with different details, but always the same ending. He saved her life and in doing so, found his own. As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear, Vincent and Sarah sat together in the peaceful evening, their hands entwined, their hearts full. The trail that had brought them together all those years ago had seemed like the end of Sarah's story. Instead, it had been the beginning of theirs, a beginning that led to a lifetime of love, family, and a happiness neither had dared to dream possible. In the distance, a horse whinnied from the barn, answered by another. The sound of their grandchildren's laughter drifted through the open windows. Somewhere in the house, Elizabeth was starting dinner, the smell of baking bread beginning to perfume the evening air. This was their legacy, Vincent thought. Not just the ranch or the family name, but this love, this life they'd built together from the moment he'd seen blood on the trail and stopped to investigate. Every choice after that moment had led them here, to this porch, this evening, this perfect contentment. "Thank you," he said quietly to Sarah, knowing she'd understand he meant for everything, for all of it, for the whole beautiful mess of their life together. "Thank you," she echoed, and they sat together as the stars came out, watching the night descend on the Colorado mountains they'd called home for over 25 years. Their children would grow old, and their grandchildren would have children of their own, and the O'Sullivan Ranch would continue for generations. But it all started here on this land, with a man who stopped to help a woman in need and a woman who trusted a stranger with her broken body and broken dreams. Vincent had found her injured on the trail, carried her home, and never let her leave. Sarah had chosen to stay, and in staying, had found everything she'd ever been searching for. It was a simple story in many ways, a tale as old as time itself. But it was their story, and it was perfect. The evening deepened into night, and eventually they rose together, moving into the warmth of their home, surrounded by the family their love had created. Behind them, the mountains stood eternal, silent witnesses to the love story that had unfolded in their shadow. A reminder that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the most unexpected places, and that true love, once found, lasts forever.